All right, we're learning Baad Kodesh, which is originally a letter that the Mittler Rebbe wrote to the governor of Vitebsk, who was overseeing his trial for treason. And the Mittler Rebbe is explaining Kabbalistically the powers of the government. And so far we've been speaking a lot about which divine attribute, which sphera.
Malchus.
Well, we're going to get to Malchus.
Tiferes.
We've been speaking a lot about Tiferes, yeah. So the past couple of chapters have been focusing on Tiferes being that harmonizing energy that brings together the opposites, and also we spoke a little bit about how even the opposites contain each other, they include each other. All right, today, God willing, we're going to get to Malchus, which is really the punchline all along that we were driving at. We're on chapter 5, and I'm hoping we'll do chapters 5 and 6 today, and then next week we can finish with chapter 7 and 8. Next week will actually be Yud Kislev, which is the Yom HaGeula of the Mittler Rebbe. So that would be a propitious time to make that siyum. Okay, chapter 5, Ois Hey. V'im kol hatzah hazois hanal, humuvenis le'enei basar b'seichel anushi b'dalid chelkei datzcham. Based on all the foregoing explanations that we've given on all the 4 levels of inanimate, vegetative, animal, and human. Remember, we went through and gave concepts of Tiferes or illustrations of Tiferes on every different level. We talked about the tastes and the sounds and the etc. Okay. So through that, what we've covered, Yuvan Mizeh, Lamaile, B'dimyan v'tzir einei haseichel, will be able to intellectually envision, or at least have some type of an abstract model for what this means in terms of, he says lamaila, but that means in terms of divinity. Because of Eov, like Job said, M'bsariach zelakah, from my flesh I see godliness. In other words, we can extrapolate based on our understanding of the way things are down here, what the archetype must be up there, from whence the lower level manifestations derive. It's a common concept in Chassidus. Okay. Lefi shebetzelem Elokim asa es ha'adam, because after all, God created man in his image. Shenaisa b'tzir gimel kaven, the aser sfiras datzilas ha'alyenes, begimel medregas de Chabad canal. Because these 3 vectors that we've discussed, they exist in Atzilos, in the highest world, and then that's the sort of pattern that is repeated on all the different levels that we've discussed. Okay. V'hu inyan hayidua be'eser sfirais Atzilos bechlalos eich shenetzlu min ha'maitzil. And this is the concept of how the emanations flow forth or emanate forth from the emanator. She'inyan Atzilos k'mei v'yatzel min ruach. She'zeu inyan shenikra hafrosh of avdalos or cotton migadol ka'oir anitzutz min hashal haves. Atzilos, the word Atzilos, which is the name for the highest world, the world of archetypes. One meaning of that word is, he calls it hafrasha, separation, taking off a piece, breaking off a chunk. When Moshe Rabbeinu bestows his spirit upon the 70 elders. So that's the pasuk that we just quoted from the book of Numbers. And it means to sort of take off a piece.
What Atzilos means?
Yeah, that's one meaning of it. It has multiple meanings, but that's one meaning of the word. And he says like a spark from a flame. A little spark from a larger flame. Kachein eses firish nikru b'shem Oires Elyenim. So too the 10 spheres, which are called supernal lights. In other words, they are like a, call it perhaps miniature representation of the infinite. So it's like they are a chip off the old block, so to speak, of the divine. However, God forbid, do not think we mean it literally when we compare it to light. It's not like physical light, like photons. You know, the photon went to a hotel. He went to the desk clerk. He said, I'd like to check in. The desk clerk said to the photon, do you have any luggage? He said, no, sir, I'm traveling light. I like that.
That's good.
Okay. So we're not talking about photons. What?
Paraphrase just what you've read so far. Could you just give
Yeah, he's saying that what Atzilus is, and that it's a representation of divinity, and that the structure of the Eser Spheros are a representation of the infinite that we can grasp, as he'll explain. Okay, but he says, first of all, don't think that we're literally comparing it to physical light. It's metaphorical light. It's only a metaphor, he says. I'll give you another metaphor, he says. Think about a person's soul powers. Let's talk about the power of intellect that's in his mind, that's in his brain. The energy that is intellectual power is actually just a small portion of his larger soul energy. It's like you have a certain amount of power running to the house, and this amount of power is running to the blender, and this amount of power is running to the bread maker, and this one's running to the Cuisinart. So there's this larger soul power, which is this aggregate, nondescript, simple power. And then when it runs through the brain, it gets translated into intellectual power. V'chein hamidais shebeseichel v'rotzein mistayif me'etzem ha'nefesh er pashu v'chein hamidais shebeseichel v'rotzein v'hamidais shebalev hoyu klulim be'etzem ha'nefesh be'bitul ha'metzias legamri. Also, as we go to lower levels of midos, of the heart, the same concept pertains. Rak shiyatzim bechinas helam shemanefesh legilui his chalkus. The only difference is it goes from a latent state to a revealed state. Ki im b'metzias umahus kol echad b'metzias umahus b'fnei atzmi. Each one in its particular way. In other words, there's this general energy called the soul, which is nondescript, simple in its oneness. And then as it gets channeled through the different vessels, call it, then it takes on the different descriptions that are knowable to us. Kodesh yisnaheg b'sichloi umidesav l'maisa b'chol tzrochav, so that the person can use his mind and his emotions to go about doing all the things he needs to do. Kach yuvan l'maila, so too, you could apply this to our understanding of the Spheros. Shezesha Amr b'maimer Eliyahu Zal. This is indeed what Eliyahu, Navi Elijah the prophet, says in the Pasach Eliyahu, in the introduction to Tikkun Zayar. Antu chad v'loi b'choshben. You, Hashem, are one, but not in the numerical sense. Not like 1, 2, 3, 4. One meaning oneness, totality. Chad be'echod ha'poshet, be'echod poshet ha'amiti v'loi b'choshben yod tzfiris klal. Meaning to say, you are not a composite of attributes, you are simple oneness. Just like we were saying as a metaphor, the soul is simple oneness, it's just that it becomes articulated as different manifestations in its revealed state. Indeed, as Eliyahu goes on and says in the Pasach Eliyahu, you Hashem are a chacham, but not in the knowable sense of chachma. In other words, we experience you in one context as a chacham, but we're not using that to label you, to contain you, or limit you. And indeed, even in a human being, his chachma is just an expression of a larger energy, a more holistic energy, which is the soul, chula, etc. Top of the page, 16. Same thing, not just with chachma, which is an intellectual power, but same thing with chesed, which is an emotional power. Rak Shehetzel yud sfiris min halam legilui kedei lanhoga behind alman chulu. It's just that the oneness expresses itself in these various manifestations in order to conduct worlds. Kemelech basav adam. Oh, here we're getting back to the main point. Like a king of flesh and blood. Shemanhig midinase b'mitzua nachin mebeis hamidais de chesed gvura shebesichle u'mideis of shenikra emes v'nikra tiferes chulu. The king uses a combination and a balance of the two attributes of chesed and gvura, the right and the left extremes, both intellectually and emotionally, and this balance is called emes, and it's also called tiferes. As we've said, it's called emes because it's that totality. It has all the extremes within it, and it's called tiferes because there's the beauty of harmonization. Sheyesh by his kalos mikol ha'apchim de chesed gvura yachad b'meziga yafa nechena hakanal. And in this ultimate harmonization, you have a beautiful combination of the extremes together. B'chol zeh yoven bira inyan shel sfiras hamalchus. And now we're going to understand, based on all of this, the concept of sfiras hamalchus. Till now, we've been speaking very heavily about tiferes. Now we're going to speak about Malchus. Shemetzayir b'tzir hanal, which is depicted in the image, the previous image. Remember we had the little chart? Yeah. She'imedis tachas hakav amtzoi di tiferes yosoid canal. And if you remember visually how it was depicted, where is Malchus situated? In the middle, under the vector which contains Tiferes and Yesod. So if you run across the Midais, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, right, left, center, you have Tiferes in the middle of the Chagas plane, which is the emotional plane. And then on the attitudinal plane, you have Netzach, Hod, Yesod. I'm going right, left, center. Yesod is in the center. And then if you go to the very bottom, you have Malchus in the center vector. Kihine, and remember the whole point is we want to talk about the function of Malchus, which literally means kingship, because we're trying to understand the role of the earthly king. Kihine isa besifrei HaKabbalah, the gam shemidus malchus yisbaruchu sfira achroina the eser sfiras hanetz alama erensof mekabelas megimala kavin. It's explained, it's brought in the Kabbalistic books that midus malchus, the attribute of Hashem's kingship, is the last sfira. By the way, this was a point of contention. The people who were trying to get the Alter Rebbe and the Mittler Rebbe in trouble use this to sort of egg on the authorities and say, you see, Chassidus and Kabbalah is revolutionary. I don't mean revolutionary like innovative. I mean like revolution, like the thing that they were afraid would happen, and it did happen in 1917 when they killed the Romanovs. So, and the thing that had happened already in France, which they were afraid of happening. You understand that they killed the king in France, and this was only like when the Alter Rebbe was brought to jail. I mean, it was within the same decade when they killed the king in France, so it was pretty fresh on their minds. And they were able to push it off, like a lot of progress in Russia. They were able to push it off for a century, but they pushed off the revolution. But yeah, you understand they were afraid of revolutions. So the people who were against Chassidus said, you see, the Kabbalistic model puts Malchus at the bottom. They're denigrating Malchus. Yeah, that was one of their... Okay. So the Mittler Rebbe says that Malchus, Hashem's Malchus, is the Sfira Achroina, is the lowest or the last, culminating, final Sfira. And it receives from all three vectors. It's sort of like the funnel. You got the wide end and the narrow end. So the wide end's at the top, and it's receiving from all the higher spheroids, and it's the interface. Al kol ze b'midazu davke ikar hashpas alakos lechol habruyim va'ilmas ha'alyenim haruchnim kamalachim v'chayis ha'kedish debriya v'yitzira v'ayin sarim shalamayla sheba'ilm ha'asiya shemekablam malchus da'asiya ad hashpa ruchnis dedali desidis eish ruch maim offer shenimshach beharkovas dali desidis gashmim bedalid chelke daim tzemei chayim daber. He says, listen, Malchus is the source for all of the flow of creative energy to all of the worlds, the higher worlds of the spiritual entities and the angels and the 70 ministering angels of each nation, and as well as Malchus is the source of energy to the physical world and to all of the four elements and everything that's composed of them, meaning everything and all the four kingdoms of human and animal and vegetative and inanimate. Everything's coming from Malchus. It all comes from Malchus. Malchus is the funnel. Shebezehu kol ikar sibas shinuyim v'chilufim sha'anu rayim ba'aliyais v'yeridais b'bnei adam. And in fact, Malchus is responsible for all of the differences that we perceive in the levels of people. Malchus is not just providing everything, it's also that which is responsible for all the differences between things. Kamei ba'aisha va'aini, like wealth and poverty. Shehein chay tzar v'chay nachas. The difference between a painful life and a pleasurable life. Shiflus valius mizman lisman, or being in a low state, or being in an elevated state. All of these changes and differences, they all are due to what is flowing forth from Malchus. Malchus is the delivery system, and that's what's going to determine which countries and which people are going to fare this way or that way. Because Hashem's eyes are open to all of the ways of man, l'shalom le'ish k'maiseyu, b'ashgacha lekis protis, to repay each one according to his exact supervision of their deeds. So Hashem is making sure that what everyone receives from that shipping center in Malchus is exactly appropriately allotted to that person. K'meshikosov de Hashem alakecha meshamayim hibit Hashem chulu hameven kol maiseyim chulu. Hashem looks forth, gazes forth from heaven, and supervises and makes allotments. Okay. So what
he
we're
decides who's going to be rich, who's going to be poor, who's going to
right.
country,
But the
as
point
individuals.
is that not that he decides it. This we know. How that gets done. It is through the channel of Malchus, which allots to each one exactly what is appropriate based on Hashem's decision. Okay.
Why is it significant?
Why is it significant?
That Malchus is the delivery system. Like, what does that imply?
What does it imply? Well, it implies that every single condition that is observable to us can be directly traced to some adjustment in the way that Malchus is delivering the divine energy from on high. Everything that's going on down here is an adjustment that's made in Malchus.
Can we influence that?
I don't know. We didn't speak about it. I don't-
Malchus and Melech like a similar concept? Like you send a Malach for different...
Well, you said whatever's happening above
Okay.
is happening down here. No, as a miracle.
I don't know a whole lot yet. Okay, let's just find out. Let's continue learning. All I know so far is about right, left, and center stuff. I know that. I know that whatever we learned about Tiferes, Malchus is even more so, because it's the center vector, but it's the final center vector. So it's the final aggregator. And it brings everything together, and then it allots it all and doles it out in a very exact way. So that's what I know. That's what I know. All right.
Should be the most balanced, like, fair way because it's coming from.
Well, that's an interesting thing that you're saying right now, because that's exactly where we're headed. That's an interesting observation. Yes, it should be the most fair and balanced. It should be the most fair and balanced. That's exactly where we're headed. Let's find out what he says. Okay. Chapter 6. V'hinei. Amr. It says, Hatzur tamim pa'alai ki kol drachav mishpat. The rock, meaning Hashem, his ways are perfect. Everything he does is perfect. He doesn't make mistakes because all of his ways are mishpat. How are we going to translate mishpat?
Justice.
Justice. Okay, good. All right. If we translate mishpat as justice, will you be confused with how we translate din?
What's the distinction?
Oh, very good. I don't know yet. But there clearly is. And mishpat and din are not the same.
Din seems like it's more of a gvura.
Din is gvura.
Din is gvura.
It is
Mishpat
gvura.
is-
We spoke about it in previous chapters, that chesed is the kindness, and din is the...
Restraint.
Gvura is often translated as restraint, yeah.
But more exacting to what is deserved as opposed to mishpat.
Maybe, I don't know, let's find out. But I just want to do a little heads up that if I accidentally translate both mishpat and din as justice, that would be a very poor, not just very poor translation, that would be a translation that would cause us to conflate two separate concepts. So let's make sure not to do that.
It's also connected with tzedek. Mishpat
Mishpat tzedek, yeah, a just verdict, yeah. Okay, let's find out about mishpat. Daktik leimer mishpat dafka, de midas mishpat hu midas hamitzua hanal. The verse says mishpat, the word mishpat specifically, because mishpat really represents the concept that we've been speaking about of balance. Mishpat is balance. If you think about it, it doesn't use this analogy, but elsewhere in Chassidus it does. Let's say you have a tribunal of 3 dayanim, 3 judges. And let's say one is lenient and one is strict. And then the 3rd judge comes and is machriya. He brings a compromise.
That would be mishpat.
That would be mishpat, yeah. So the lenient judge and the strict judge, they may have very different views from each other. The judge who is the voice of mishpat can see both perspectives. Maybe he would say even, I'm not saying that the guy didn't do a crime. I'm not saying it's not wrong what he did, but I am saying there were extenuating circumstances. In other words, I don't have to pretend that he didn't do the crime. I don't have to pretend that the crime wasn't a crime, but I can take into account other factors. That's what we mean by balance.
Is that similar to Tiferes or parallel?
Yes, it is.
So it
That's
exists in the
precisely,
center.
that is precisely what we're saying.
Okay.
We're saying mishpat is in the same vector as Tiferes. That is precisely what we're saying.
But that's like a scale thing. That's like the tzedek, like a.
Right, and so that is the just verdict that takes into account the whole picture, which is also why it's emes. Like we said before, emes is the totality, the whole picture. When you look at a slice of the picture, that's when you become an extremist. When you can look at the big picture and have a broad mind, that's when you can start to compromise and to see nuance. Which I know is a dirty word in 2024, almost 2025, with partisan politics being ingrained through basically a bunch of bots online, amping up all of our extremist thinking. But yes, generally it is good to be able to see nuance. Yeah. Let's continue here. I want to finish this. All right. So you have the midas hametzua hanal, this above-mentioned balancing trait, which, we've been describing it as tiferes, but it's also mishpat. Shememazig v'kolol mebeis hapchim de chesed gvura bekama ribuy eifanim sheinim dafka. That is what contains within it the different extremes. V'hu bechinas midas hamalchus l'mayla shenikra melech al kol oilam ha'isal yen v'sachtenim ad elam hazeh shaful. And this is also Malchus, which is in the center vector, as we just learned, which is the king over all of the worlds, higher and lower. Shalzeh Amr Melech b'mishpat yamid aretz. And that's why it says the king establishes the land with mishpat. That the king is the embodiment of mishpat. B'mishpat dafka, specifically the word mishpat. B'midas hametzua shenikra emes, which is the balancing trait, which is also known as emes, truth. Lei b'chesed levad, lei b'din levad. It's not solely chesed, nor is it solely din. It's the totality and the balance. Remember the context, by the way. The Mitler Rebbe is writing to the person who gets to decide whether or not he's going to be convicted of treason. Kamei Malchus da'ara shikafi erech memshaltei hagdoila al kol hamedina sheyesh b'midas hanhagis Malchus bechinas hiskalulus de chesed gvura. Just like the Malchus da'ara, that means the earthly kingship, that means we've been speaking until now about Hashem's midas hamalchus. Now we're speaking about an earthly king. That the king has to administrate. Is that the proper verb?
Administer.
Check out if administrate is a verb. Because I think administrate is more correct than administer.
Right, I didn't hear the rest of your sentence.
Yeah. Like you administer a treatment. This administrate.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Well, it's a less common term for administer.
Oh, it's the same thing as administer? I thought it had a different connotation than administer. Okay. So the king has to run things. Use a nice Anglo-Saxon word. He has to run things with a balance of traits. The king cannot be an extremist.
You could though.
Not a good one. Shim yor b'chesed yesimedai, because if he will exhibit too much chesed when he's running his government, yarbu agazlonim ve'esemirma ve'ovel ve'ishes re'u chayim b'lo'ei, then you're going to have a lot of thieves and con artists who will do bad to each other, and one man will swallow the other one alive. You'll have anarchy. So if the king is too lenient, he's soft on crime, then you're going to have a lawless society. But if he's too tough, if he's too strict, Yashir Games Hatzadik Kanal, he'll end up being tough on innocent people. He will cause people to suffer needlessly in the name of law and order. He'll say, well, you got to run a country, and this is how it's done. Like Saddam Hussein, the first day he took control, he's like, you, take him out to be shot. It'll be safe. It'll be quiet, because you never know if you'll be the guy be dragged outside and shot.
Is this only in Maruka? Because, is it built into the legal system that you're allowed to be
take into consideration other things. It has to be built into the legal system, which is not.
What's your question? Is this only with a monarchy?
Meaning like, yeah, like if you're having
No, it's any government.
if you have a trial and you're sticking to the letter of the law, is it built into the legal system that you're allowed to be lenient? And then you are still sticking to the letter.
I'm not sure your question.
If I want to be lenient based
You
on
personally?
No, if I'm a judge or whatever.
Oh, I don't know if different political systems have built in this type of allowance or not. He's making a statement. He's making an observation that if you have a government that is run with too much chesed, you're going to have, unfortunately, people who will take advantage of that. On the other hand, if you have a government which is tyrannical, which is totalitarian, then innocent people are going to suffer. Shiavakshu lahabed gam es hatzadik kerasha v'yishpech dam noki harbe. He's going to convict the innocent and spill lots of innocent blood. So we know neither of those things are good. Al kain amar melech b'mishpat yamid aretz dafka. That's why it says that the melech, meaning a good melech, runs his land with mishpat, not with too much chesed, not with too much din, not too liberal, not too strict, but just, who said that? Goldilocks?
That's right.
Just right. Just right. Bechinas hametzua shenikra emes. The balanced trait, which is called truth. Remember that aleph through taf, balanced perfectly in the center with the mem. Hu yamed aretz lahamidum alakaimum ba'aretz. That's how he keeps things running. Ve'ein roi v'shayich zeh b'midas mishpat hamitzua al haroi b'bechinas emes lahamite rak b'melech levad v'lei b'shar adam zulase. And by the way, to get this balance just right, a regular person can't do it. It's got to be a melech, nobody else. Interesting statement. And anybody like me who's proud to be an American, and you read those words, it's like, what? Only the melech can do this? Well, just reading what it says. I know that we don't like that concept, but maybe melech means president, maybe it means senator. I don't know what it is, but the Mittler Rebbe is for sure saying that the human being who's going to be able to get this kind of balance right, this balance that is representative of what Hashem's Midas HaMalchus does, it's the Melech. It's only the Melech. V'hu lefi shemeir boy memidas Malchus edatzilos. And the reason is because the Melech down here is the channel through which Hashem's Malchus of Atzilos is shining. Not some other guy. Not some political scientist, some professor at the university who's an expert in government. He may be an expert, he may know a lot, but he's not the channel down here of Hashem's Malchus. It's just the Melech.
Even secular kings.
What do you mean secular kings? Yes.
Every king, not just like Jewish kings.
Not just Jewish kings. No. The Mittler Rebbe is writing to a non-Jewish governor, and he's explaining to him his role. He's saying, you, sir, are the channel and the embodiment of Hashem's Malchus down here.
He's a governor.
He's a governor. Okay, so, but the way that things were run back then, he had total power in his locale, in his region.
Consider judges would be in that?
Yeah, who can you apply this to? I don't know. Okay. Shehi sfira achroina which, as we mentioned, Malchus is the last sfira. It's the culmination, like we said. It's the delivery system. It's the final portal through which all of the different combinations above are going to go get allotted to wherever they need to be exactly allotted. V'hu ma shenimshach lamayla ba kol hamshachas b'mida hazois megiva lakavan shehen gimel midas dechesed gvura haklulais b'midas hatiferes kanal hanikra emes. So Malchus is that which is delivering all of the combinations from the three kavan. Umiskalulus umiziga zu bo v'nimshach b'midas malchusei hamalchus shaloi lahani kola elam b'chesed v'din b'mitzua. And that's how Malchus functions, to deliver the perfectly balanced combination of chesed and din. Ki malchusa da'ara kein malchusa da'rekia mamash. Like the Gemara says, I think it's a Gemara in Chulin, that maybe someone Google it for me, the earthly kingship is like the heavenly kingship, meaning the political king, the person of the king, is an embodiment of the heavenly kingship, meaning of Hashem's kingship. V'hainu mitam hanal, and that's for the reason that we mentioned before. And now we understand what we spoke about, I think it was back in chapter 1 already, yeah? Where it says, Yoras Hashem b'ni umelech, fear Hashem, my son, and the king. Remember from Shlomo Melech? Fear Hashem, my son, and the king. Sheshava Yiras Hashem, bebechinas Malchus derekia elyein, im Yiras HaMelech shlamata. That the verse equates the awe, the reverence of the earthly king, or rather it says the opposite, the heavenly king, with the fear and the awe and the reverence of the earthly king. Im shoinim, and then the verse continues, right? Remember, who has the original verse? Want to go look it up? I think it was in chapter 1. Fear Hashem, my son, and the king, and then it continues. The rest of the verse. Im hashoinim, with the people who we said who make changes. What? Al tisarev, don't mix with them. Hamachalkim emafridim beinehem, the people who make a separation, in other words, who make a distinction between the heavenly kingship and the earthly kingship and say, two different things, two different concepts. Al tisarev, don't mix with those guys. Don't be one of those guys. Because it will actually take you away from the awe of heaven, because it's one thing. Interesting concept. He says now.
But the lower kingship is not always a reflection. They could be corrupted.
They could be corrupted. And yet he says that a person who distinguishes the earthly kingship from the heavenly kingship and says, it's just a guy, it doesn't represent anything, that will actually cause you to diminish your Yiras Hashem. There's a certain respect. I know, again, I'm proud to be an American, so not only we don't respect authority, but there's something in our American DNA that actually loves to flout authority, that cowboy attitude. But please remember that even Pare, Melech Mitzrayim, who was a maniac and a murderer, and Moshe used to treat him respectfully, even when he would go warn him about
Because he needed stuff.
Okay, so maybe you're going to say it was politically expedient. Yeah. I'm saying it was spiritually true.
Okay.
A melech is a melech. A melech is a melech. So what he's saying here is that somebody who separates the earthly kingship from the heavenly kingship and then denigrates the earthly kingship by saying it's just a guy will actually cause himself to lose Yiras Shamayim. That's what he's saying. Let's finish with a few more lines. Lefi Shemeir Mo'er Malchus Ha'elyon Ha'elakim Melech Shalamata, because the higher kingship is shining into the king. Sheba mishpat shel emes dafka yamid aretz kanal, which this higher energy that's shining into the king is allowing the king to run things with mishpat, with divine mishpat.
The higher energy
of Hashem's Malchus is shining into the Melech, giving the Melech unique abilities to run the country with mishpat, which we mentioned is that unique balance. So there may be other people who are smarter than him or whatever, but the Melech is the one who has that special access to Hashem's Malchus, and he's the one who's going to be able to get the right combination. Okay, okay. Like we said, Hashem, all of his ways are perfect, and his ways are
But you see
mishpat.
so many
Corruption. Yeah.
leaders in the
Yeah.
the world that are
Yeah.
despots and
I hear
killing
you.
their people.
I hear you. I never thought of that. Of course I thought of that. Well, I'm telling you what the Mittler Rebbe is
So Hashem
saying.
is shining their they have Malchus because they have
they also have
they have
authority.
leadership, whether they grabbed it by force
So you're
or
saying
not.
they misuse it, perhaps? Maybe you're saying that they're squandering that ability, that they're refusing to step up and to be what they're supposed to be? Maybe. I don't know. He doesn't address that here
So are
specifically.
these leaders and despots getting the same shining Malchus?
That's what it seems to be saying. That's what it seems to be saying. Ulazeh hatam mitzvah lispalo b'shlema shel malchus. That's the reason why it's a mitzvah to pray for the welfare of the government. Ki zehu nimshich mishlema shel melech ha'elyon shenikra melech sha'shalom shaloi ki yadua. Because the higher king, sha'shalom shaloi, Melech Shloimeh, King Solomon, is also sometimes a byword for Hashem, who is the Melech Sha'shalom Shaloi. So Hashem's kingship is shining into the earthly king. So you better pray for the welfare of that government, because that's how you're going to get more of Hashem's blessings in our lives.
He's the funnel.
He's the funnel. You don't like it? He's the funnel. I'm sorry. V'zeu v'darshas shalom ha'ir, shalom ha'ir chulud. Seek out the peace of the city in which you live. And remember, the original context is talking about the Jews in exile. These Babylonians came and took you into exile, and now you should pray for their peace? Yeah, well, you're living under their authority. Yeah, you better pray for their peace. You understand, the Babylonians come, they destroy the temple, they take the Jews into exile, and you're supposed to pray for them? Yeah, because you're living under their authority. They're the government. Yeah, you pray for their success. Ki b'shloima dafka, because only through their welfare, the welfare of the government, yelachem shalom, will there be peace for you. Shemameno yaveh oyer v'shafa shalom l'chol adam mitamanel, because all of the peace, all the welfare will come to us down here through them. That's the funnel. You may not like the funnel, but that's the funnel. And that's also why the Gemara says that the law of the land is binding law. And it gives secular governments, Torah grants the laws of secular governments the authority of Torah law. Why? For this very reason. We got one line left. And that is also the reason why you're supposed to make a blessing when you see a king. Doesn't say a good king, a successful king, a wise king. No, any king.
What's the blessing?
Blessed are you, Lord, our God, who gave from his glory to flesh and blood. So you're supposed to make that blessing, because it doesn't matter if you like the king, agree with the king, admire the king. It doesn't matter. He's the king. He's that manifestation, that embodiment, that representation of Hashem's kingship. That's it. That's the reality. End of chapter 6.